You're listening to the Foreign and International Medical Graduate Show, a podcast to inspire physicians in the process of immigration to the United States and access to graduate medical education. We create meaningful and helpful content that motivates medical students and doctors throughout the world, with the goal of creating a community that supports itself and gives feedback to each other, that stays updated with the most recent tips and advice on how to make it in America and become a successful resident or fellow in the speciality of your dreams. Dr. Alonso Osorio is board certified and residency trained in both emergency and family medicine and will be bringing you 20 years of his personal experiences, struggles, and motivation. We'll be chatting with people like you to talk about the lessons they've learned along their personal path, how to make an impact, and how we can all benefit from it. Also, we'll analyse the current resources available and how to benefit from them. Thanks for joining us. Please enjoy the show.
Hello, superstars. This is your host, Dr. Alonso Osorio, and here I am back again with episode number 23. And today I have a Colombian fellow of mine that just recently matched. So I'm going to concentrate on this episode along with Dr. Escobar, Dr. Freddy Escobar, to speak about what is his experience of successfully matching into neurology. And we connected via the internet, and I felt that an experience like his could be of significant help for the people right now that didn't match. And if you guys match, obviously you could relate to his personal successful story. So Dr. Freddy Escobar has joined us. He's currently living in Orlando, Florida, and he's relatively close to his future training program through the University of Central Florida in Orlando, based out of Osceola Regional Hospital. And we're excited to have him. Thank you for joining, Dr. Freddy Escobar.
Thank you, Dr. Osorio. Thank you very much for inviting me. That was a very nice and flattering introduction.
No, yeah. So he's a Colombian fellow. I'm from Bucaramanga, and Dr. Escobar is from Neiva, Colombia. And tell us about where do you go to medical school?
Yes, so I went to medical school at Universidad Surcolombiana, which is in Neiva. Neiva is located towards the south of the country, southwest. It's a public university, similar to your school as well. And it's a nice region. It's very hot. I can tell you that much. I don't know if you're familiar with the region at all, but there's a lot to it. It's very nice. It's kind of like where I lived most of my life is a kind of intermediate to small type of city. So that's pretty much where I grew up and where I spent most of my life. Before that, I lived here in the States until I was about 8 years old. My parents are both university professors, and they're both professors at the same school where I went for medical school. Cool.
And I'm extremely delighted to know that you've been successful for a medical graduate matching in neurology, which is a competitive specialty, and it's a categorical position. Is that correct?
Yes, it is a categorical position. So I'm very happy to have matched into it was actually my number one rank. So very excited to have that opportunity and to know that I'll start working just a few months from now, in July 1st.
And I can tell that you have an advantage over me. You don't have an accent, and I think it's because of the fact that you spend your first 8 years of your life here in the United States. And I don't know if that had to play a role or gave you a handicap when you came for the interviewing, because I can tell you your English is so smooth. And I would say that's one of the tips of advice that I would recommend to all the Colombians or any foreign medical graduate across the world to probably polish a little bit more before you even go through the interviewing process. So congratulations on that. I know you speak a little bit of French as well, huh?
Yeah, so I also lived in Montreal after I finished high school, before starting medical school. In terms of that being an actual advantage, I think that was probably part of the reason why I got a job as a medical assistant here in Orlando. I had that for a short period, and the office I was working at was particularly interesting because it was a very multilingual setting. Most patients were Haitian, and most of the staff was Haitian, so there was a lot of French going on, and I also caught a little bit of understanding a bit of French Creole, which is what they speak mostly down there in Haiti. So definitely languages, I think that's a good asset to have. I think it's important to brush up on your skills, or your skills in whatever language you're trying to learn. And not only that, but also just living here in the States is also an advantage. I feel that a lot of people just apply from, their home countries, and they're not very familiar to a lot of social context and a lot of very subtle aspects of what it's like to live in the States.
Yes. And can you tell us a little bit more about when you decided, I guess after living here, you went to Colombia and said, I'm going to become a doctor. After I become a doctor, I want to come back to America. What was your mindset and your thought process of wanting to return to the United States? Because you obviously have no problem with your visa. Nobody has to sponsor you, nothing, because you have a United States passport, correct?
I'm a citizen. I'm a citizen of the United States by birth. And I think that's definitely an advantage in terms of, right now I know that there's a lot of people who match but are concerned with visa appointments and the whole J and H visas, some problems that are, I don't know the issue very well though, but being a citizen is definitely an advantage. In terms of what made me decide to come back to the States, my story is a bit particular. I lived here as a kid, and then when I went to Colombia, I was 8 years old, so just adapting to life in Colombia, even though both my parents are Colombian and Spanish was always spoken at home, it was still quite a bit of a culture shock. Just living in a different country and adapting to it when you're a kid has a lot of things, like interests, for example, interests in toys or sports, or I wasn't very into soccer, for example. I remember just a bunch of little details of when you're a kid. But getting back to where I was going to, definitely deciding to come back to the States had to do with doing a rotation here in the United States as a medical student. I was in my 9th semester, and during a vacation period between my 9th and my 10th semester, I went to New Jersey, and I figured out, I was told by the residents how the whole STEP thing work, how the whole USMLEs work. I didn't know anything about that until then. I thought it was something out of my reach because everybody always talks about the USMLEs like it's some sort of mystical thing, like it's something that nobody can achieve. But it's really not like that.
Yeah, it's so weird since you say that. It's like, it feels weird. Like somebody talks to you about it. Like, is that even possible that I could become a doctor in another country?
And I never even contemplated the possibility of coming back to the States until I did that rotation. Even though, I always had an interest in living in the States since I went to live to Colombia, I was always thinking about, maybe eventually I'll have the opportunity to go back. But I never thought of it as something that would happen during the middle of my training. I thought maybe at the very end of it. I thought maybe 10 or 20 years down the road, it would be something I'd consider. I didn't know what the process was. And I learned about it from other international medical graduates. I remember there was one from India and there was one from Iran at where I did my rotation in New Jersey. And that was pretty much what set me up for getting into all of this. And, before that, I didn't know what UWorld was. I didn't know what First Aid was. I never heard of any of those things. And definitely, I think it's important to create that sense of community between the foreign medical graduates, because that is what makes people go forward. Even in my case, I had all these advantages as a citizen here in the States, and I never even thought about it because nobody pointed me toward that direction.
Correct. And since you say that, our listeners, please join our Facebook group so we can get the conversation started. And if you have any inquiries or topics that you want to touch upon, just feel free to post your comments. And that's extremely useful, not only for me, but as you said, it's extremely important to get the community together. So obviously these two people that you met in New Jersey can explain you that their hopes were potentially to come to the United States as doctors as well, like you decided to do, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, sorry. You were in JFK Medical Center in Edison, New Jersey then?
Yes, JFK Medical Center.
So you came back to Colombia and you had all these questions within yourself and you're like, what am I going to do next? What was that process like? You got to Colombia and what happened?
Exactly. So I got back after that rotation and I started noticing I started seeing things differently. Just the attitude that people have towards, your training in Colombia is a bit different. I remember that the coordinator of our internship program, in Colombia, that we do our internship before we graduate. So I remember that the way that he approached us when we would ask for off-site rotations or anything that was kind of special or different from the ordinary, there was not always a positive response. They weren't very supportive, and their answer was always limited to, well, our hospital needs interns, so it doesn't make sense for us to send you somewhere else. And personally, I just felt very discouraged that, I didn't feel that my own future was in my hands. I didn't feel that I was worthy of choosing my own path because of all these limitations set by the administration of my school.
And it's so sad that you bring this up, because that was the same attitude that I had from the people from my medical school. And it seems like, I don't know if there is envy or what, but they want to keep you there. They don't want to even open your eyes or help you to find your wings to fly away. I don't know what's their concern or the mindset that is happening, but obviously in 20 years, it hasn't changed much.
Well, unfortunately, it hasn't. It's still very much the same, at least in my school. I know it's changing in bigger cities. I know a lot of the schools in Bogota, a lot of the private schools are a bit more open to letting their students choose what they want to do, letting them choose electives and letting them do rotations offsite, and encouraging them to pursue the USMLEs, or if they want to, apply for residency in some other country, they kind of provide the tools for it. And I think that's kind of the most ideal scenario. And it's what I see in medical schools here in the United States. I notice that medical students are very much empowered, and there's a lot of dedication to their wellness. And I'm sure these schools here in the States invest a lot in making sure that their students become successful physicians and that they're also happy doing whatever they want to do. And I think it's important to give people the tools to succeed.
So obviously you got no help from the local attending. So how do you get time to do all these things, the studying, the process of coming here to do clerkships? Really quickly, tell us how you accomplish all that in such a small gap of time.
Well, from the time I graduated to right now, it's been a bit more than 2 years. I graduated in December 2017, and it's March 2020. So yeah, a little bit over 2 years. Just having the time to dedicate myself to taking the USMLEs and all of that, really it's because of support from my family. I was pretty lucky in the sense that I didn't do my social service, my rural year. My parents supported me to pursue whatever I wanted to do, and to just, study for the tests and apply for residency. So that's pretty much what I did. And I was lucky to have that support from both my parents and my sister.
So the tests are expensive. Obviously, your parents, when you're working in pesos and paying in dollars, that's a significant financial investment. So were your parents mostly the economical supporters through this process?
Definitely, yes. My parents were, they provided for everything I needed. And living with my sister here in Orlando was also a big advantage. She works here as a dentist, so just to have a place to live, and I help around a bit with the house, and I cook for her, and we have dinner together. So it's kind of a nice dynamic that we have. So definitely it's exceptional. I wouldn't say everybody has that same opportunity, and to have also matched here and be close to my sister, and my parents are pretty much just a 4-hour flight away. I think that's also, I'm very fortunate for that.
Easy to fly out from Orlando to Colombia. So, Freddy, I saw that you were successful at passing a step 1 on your first sit down. Same thing goes for the 2CK and the CS, and you already took a step 3. You're an overachiever like I did. Being an American citizen, why did you take the step 3? So
I took step 3. The reason I actually took it was I was kind of panicking after I applied because 2 weeks had passed and I hadn't gotten any invites for interviews yet. So I just said, no, I have to take this test as quick as I can. So I applied for it. And the funny thing was I got caught up with the whole interviews afterwards, and I didn't really have enough time to study for it. I actually dedicated a week to study for that test because I couldn't extend the eligibility period anymore. I got to that point where I had to, it was either take it or lose the money. So I just said, I'm not going to.
Wow. And you made it.
Yeah, it was, I honestly thought I was going to fail that test. I took it in early January, and it was tough.
So tell us about the deadline. How did you structure and plan ahead? Okay, I am ready. I have a step 1, a step 2, and step 3. I don't have to worry about my visas. I have a fantastic English. I didn't have to take the rural service in Colombia. I just came straight here. I have fantastic, phenomenal familial support from your sister, your parents in Colombia. You have this fantastic environment, which I'm going to tell you, this is lucky. This is, I would say, close to perfect. I hope someone is going through the same experience because not many of us have the luck of having been born in America. So you get all this done, you line yourself up. How do you time yourself to launch yourself towards the application process for the fall of 2000? You match on 2020 match. So for the process of the fall of 2019, correct?
Yes. So my first objective was to have everything ready by September 2018. But I failed to do that because I just didn't have the time for it. I realized that I should have started studying for the USMLEs a lot earlier. I started studying for Step 1 2 months before finishing my internship. I was in a rotation that was relatively easy in terms of time. I got off every day kind of like at 1 p.m. or so. So that's when I said, okay, I have to take advantage of this. I don't have any calls or anything, so I'm going to study for USMLE in Step 1. So that's when I started, and then I graduated. You know, after you graduate, you're all happy, you're celebrating with your friends. So I did a lot of slacking off for maybe December, you know, around holidays. And then after the holidays, I just moved to Orlando, and I said, I'm just going to study full time and, you know, help my sister around the house or whatever, but just have a place so I can study and have no distractions. So that's what I aimed for. And my plan was to have Step 1 and Step 2 CK ready by, so that was January 2018. I wanted to have everything ready by April. And of course, when you're studying for it and you start taking self-assessments and you realize that it's very much a marathon, it's not a race. You can't cram. I was probably more, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I was very used to cramming a lot of study material when I was in medical school. And studying for the USMLEs is completely different. And I realized that as I was going through the process. I also took Step 2 CS around May. So when the time came, it was about August, and I already had Step 1. I already had Step 2 CS, and I was studying for Step 2 CK, but I didn't have the time to get it ready. I didn't feel like I was ready for it, and I just decided to let it postpone everything a year because I didn't want to rush the test. My scores on Step 1 were already very average. I got a 220 on Step 1, so I said, well, I prefer to have a better score on Step 2 CK than to have 2 average scores and risk not getting many interviews. And since it's a major investment to actually apply because application costs are considerable and traveling for interviews is pretty much as expensive as it is to apply. So I ended up just taking a semester off, actually. So I took the second semester of 2018 to be at home with my parents. And then afterwards, I just started again with Step 2 CK. I took it, and I pretty much got ready for, to get to where I am now.
So your life for a while was 100% just helping your sister around the house, studying most of the day. And then you went back to Colombia and you studied even more. And, were you used to standardized testing? Because sitting down and passing everything at once is rather impressive. Do you think the fact that you read English and speak English will help you go and kind of read through the questions faster than most of us?
I don't know if that's true. The way I see it, studying for the USMLEs and reading question banks, it becomes a skill, really. There's a lot of strategy that goes into it. You kind of get a sense of if the STEM is structured in this way, then the answer is most likely to be this one. So I think a lot of it was really just practicing, and I think anybody could have the same results or even better, regardless of what their spoken English proficiency is. I know that I've met people that have amazing scores and they barely speak any English. And I think that's probably attributed to the fact that everybody reads medical literature in English, and I want to say everybody who's a physician has a higher capacity for reading and writing in English than they do for speaking. So I think everybody's pretty much on the same level in that sense.
Incredible to see that. You're not the only one that has said that before. You see these people that have impressive, unbelievable scores in paper, but in person, they're not what they are in paper. And you have to be a very well-balanced applicant.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that a lot of these people should try just having the experience of living in the States or just being around people that speak English. And I think that actually helps because a lot of, at least from my point of view, a lot of your application is very subjective. There are objective measures, but a lot of your success in your interviews depends on how you talk to people. And very subtle things. And I think that's much more important than people actually, I think people take it for granted.
Yes. Anyone like a mentor help you through this process to get you better and better and make you a stronger applicant before you actually apply for the interviewing?
So actually, no. I think that was probably one of my mistakes. I didn't seek advice in terms of what my personal statement should be or how I should structure my application. I spoke to one guy who had matched. He studied in Colombia, and he's also in neurology. He recommended a book, so I read it. He said that there was some interesting reflections of how interesting it is to be a neurologist, and maybe you'd get some ideas, for your personal statement from that. So that was actually very helpful because I did structure my personal statement around that. It's a book called Looking Down the Rabbit Hole by Alan Robert. I think that's the correct name. And so pretty much, that's the one. So in that sense, I think I should have probably looked for more advice. I think I probably would have had a bit more interviews to choose from if I had gone through that.
Wow. So we're celebrating your match. This is awesome. Obviously, neurology was your only and first residency of choice. So you had no second guesses. Tell us, how do you go through a successful match? What's the secret sauce to make it happen and make it fantastic, successful dream? So
definitely the first part of it is to have a good application, well-balanced application, to try to highlight what you're best at and try for your application to convey what you're good at. And I think I worked hard on my personal statement, and I think that since it was spoken to me during my interviews a lot about my personal statement, I think that was probably something that some people overlook, but it's very important to dedicate yourself to it, have it reviewed by somebody who speaks English as a first language, preferably somebody who knows, maybe has an English major or some sort of background like that. I didn't do that. But in my case, I've always read in English, so I think I probably did a good job with it. But yeah, in terms of applying and I don't know if there's a formula or if there's a secret sauce to how to match. I think that I was either very lucky or I just did things the right way. I mean, it definitely turned out I got a good outcome from it, but I'm sure there's a lot of things that I didn't do the right way. And I'm sure that I could have had an even better outcome in terms of just having more options to choose from. I'm happy with what I got because I got my number one option. But I think that if I were to recommend what I did to somebody else, it wouldn't turn out the right way for them. I wouldn't recommend based on my own experience because I think, it was a lot of it was luck and a lot of it was a lot of subjectiveness and just the people that interviewed me, I think they liked me. I think a lot of it had to do with that, to be honest with you.
That's extremely important, that first impression. You said that you did, quote unquote, many things wrong or things that you, looking back, would have not done again. What were those things that when looking back, you realize you could have done better? Because I guess we learn more from our mistakes than from our successes.
So I think the first mistake, so I spent 2 years into this. I think in the first year, which was 2018, I think my big mistakes that I did that year was trying to do everything. So I did rotations and I was also studying for the USMLEs. I was away from my home here in Orlando for about 4 months. So, just trying to rush everything, I think that wasn't very helpful because, in the end, I didn't have the time to do what I did. And I had this big time constraint. And it was kind of like I was kind of on a race to have everything ready for September of that year. And I wasn't able to do it. So I think that was definitely one mistake that I did. Definitely another mistake was not finding a good number of people to ask for their opinions, to ask for their advice. I pretty much went with my gut a lot, and I wouldn't advise that to anybody. In my case, it worked out, but it's not something that would work out for everybody. I think just those things I mentioned, I think that's already a lot. Just rushing through, I think because of that, I didn't get the ideal step one score. I was more concerned with having everything ready by September, then I was concerned of doing things the right way. So I just think that people need to pace themselves and try to do things in a realistic way. Try to not have too many expectations in terms of thinking that you can do everything. And something that I tell a lot of people is try not to do too many things at once. A lot of people want to work, and they also want to study for their steps. I think there's a time for everything. I think there should be a phase where you can, do that. You can do multiple things, but eventually for the USMLEs, you need a dedicated period. You need at least maybe a month of dedicated period where, you're just studying for your tests. I didn't necessarily have that for the whole period I was studying because I was doing different things and I was kind of scattered all over. So I didn't really have a good structure in terms of, I think that was probably a major issue I had. I didn't organize myself as well as I think I could have.
So Dr. Escobar had said it over and over and over to our listeners. Let's make it clear. There is no need to rush this process. There is plenty of time. I know that during those processes, many things in life happen. People are worried about their financial stability. You were lucky, or I was lucky that we were single. We had no kids. So there is many factors, but I can assure you, if you rush it, if you don't spend enough time in America, if you don't get the proper rotation, the outcome probably is not going to be good. Obviously, you have to have a very slow and a structured process because the ECFMG will ask you to explain yourself on any gap that you will have through those 2 or 3 years that you're spending on becoming a doctor in the United States, correct? So listen to his advice, and he then was extremely careful at timing his application through the electronic residency application system. How do you do it, Dr. Escobar?
So since my initial plan was to apply for the previous season, for the 2018 to 2019 match period, from very early on, I got the ERAS token, and I started uploading letters as soon as I had the chance. I finished a rotation, so I talked to my supervisor and asked for a letter, and they'd upload it right away.
Sorry for interrupting, how many letters you had total? Because I know, and I was going through your CV, you did quite a bit of rotations, 6 or 7 rotations in the United States. And before the interview, you said you also spent quite a bit of money.
Yes, I spent quite a bit of money.
So your letters of recommendations were solid from these attendings from those rotations?
Well, that's the thing. I waived my rights to see them, so I don't know what they say. But based on interactions from interviews, a lot of the attendings that interviewed me for residency positions mentioned that my letters were very strong. Some of them knew the letter writers personally or professionally, so I think those letters were definitely helpful. But I also think that it's possible to get quality letters without having to bust the bank. In my case, since I started this whole process without having my step 1 scores, a lot of the places I tried to apply to initially required them. So again, since I was rushing it, I said, no, well, at that moment, I thought it was a good idea to pay, these agencies that offer rotations. If I look back on it right now, looking back, I don't think that was a wise choice. I wouldn't recommend that to anybody because it is expensive. I mean, it's about $500 per week plus living expenses. So usually a 4-week block would cost $2,000, and then you're living in a different city that you're not very familiar with. So I wouldn't say that was a bad experience because I met a lot of very interesting people along the way, and I got good letters, and I don't know if I would have achieved what I've done without those experiences, but I definitely think it's better to do your tests first and look for observerships at, university hospitals, some places that have a better reputation, I think, not just in private practices, because most of what I did was in private practices and it was paying a bunch of money, and I could have gotten maybe even better results spending less money. So that's something that I've always told a lot of people, hey, I did this, I paid this in that agency, but I wouldn't recommend you to do the same thing unless you're really in a rush because they place you very quickly. You just get in touch with them and, all right, your rotation starts in, 3 or 4 weeks from now. So I think that's an advantage in terms of, when you're rushing through things, everything just kind of makes sense. But looking back on it, it wasn't the wisest choice.
So obviously these rotations are expensive. You said about $2,000. So you use a recruiting company, let's call it, that locates you and finds an attending physician across the United States. In this case, many of them were in Maryland. So they find this doctor. Is this doctor getting paid by the recruiting agencies a little bit, or how that works?
Yes. So they are getting paid. And the interesting thing about it is that they're also affiliated with multiple different agencies. So when you talk to other students that are rotating with you, you ask them, hey, what company did you get your rotation through? You find out how much they paid, and everybody pays a different price. And some of them actually get in contact with the attending directly, and they pay a much lower price, a considerably lower price. Just to give an example, there was one rotation where I paid $2,000, and I met a guy who paid $3,000 for that same experience, same amount of time, and another person who paid $1,000. So, these companies are taking a huge cut. In my opinion, it's profiteering. I don't think it's ethical, but I did realize that it's a major issue, and I don't know, who can do something about that. But a lot of it is...
My jaw has just dropped. I mean, I cannot believe it. How there is a friend of mine that we brought into the show, Chase DeMarco, that he's working into developing a way to place foreign and international medical graduates into clerkships and rotation in the United States without affecting us the way that people take advantage of us. But obviously, there is a need. There's people that are willing to pay this much money. There's people that have savings obviously dedicated for this. And it is just one of many ways to do things, correct?
Yeah, and that's true. I think a lot of people do get taken advantage of. But part of the problem is the fact that these companies invest very heavily in ads. If you look up clerkships or rotations in the United States, or rotations that accept international medical graduates, if you look any of those terms up, you'll find these companies, and they're going to be the first searches. So again, somebody like me who's rushing through it, that you're more likely to fall into, companies like these companies. Of course, I won't mention any of them by name. I definitely shouldn't. But I've heard different experiences from different people. And it's well agreed upon that they don't have the most honest and straightforward practices in terms of how they run their business.
Well, but they gave you a letter of recommendation, and it seems that they were solid.
Exactly.
What was the interviewing process for you? So you said that you were super worried. You took a step 3. You wanted to have it ready for the interviewing process. You were not getting any interviews. What was that time lag? Why the delay happened? Why were you so much freaking out about not getting any answers?
Okay. Well, I think part of the reason most people get a lot of anxiety is because the first place you look for answers is forums. And, there's these Reddit spreadsheets for all specialties. And the anonymity behind these sources makes for a kind of a toxic environment. So people aren't as nice as they should be on, Facebook groups, or a lot of people, upload stuff with fake profiles. So, when you have a doubt about something, the first people you look answers to, they don't usually give you any sort of reassurance. So by the time I first applied, I didn't actually know that medical schools upload their medical student performance evaluations the first week of October. I was just waiting.
That's what we call the MPSE, or the Dean's Letter.
Exactly, the Dean's Letter. So I just thought that you started getting invites right away. So maybe 3 or 4 weeks passed, and I hadn't received any invitation. So I kind of started freaking out, and I started, so what am I going to do about this? So that's when I got a spot for step 3 and everything. But throughout the whole season, I want to say most invites came at the end of October. Some of them were very last minute. I had a couple of interviews that I was invited to maybe 4 or 5 days before the actual interview, because a lot of people canceled. So from my approach to it, as an international medical graduate, I was told to apply very broadly. So I went to the AMA website. They have this resource called FREDA, or FREDA.
Fantastic resource, by the way.
Yes, I recommend that to everybody. It's a very comprehensive database of all GME programs, residency and fellowship programs. And I looked for all of the neurology programs that had, these programs post their minimum required scores. So if I had the cutoff for a particular program, then I'd apply to that program. The total number of programs I applied to was about 90.
Wow.
Which was literally every program in the country that I had the minimum score to apply to. So most of them were categorical because neurology programs are shifting towards being mostly categorical. But then again, I also applied to a few preliminary internal medicine programs because some of them were advanced programs. Advanced means that it's years 2, 3, and 4. So you have to apply separately for your first year, your internship, and years 2, 3 to 4, which is the advanced portion of your training. So in terms of invites, I know that a lot of medical students here, usually they apply to about 40 programs, maybe 50, depending on what their scores are, and they get invited to most of those programs. In my case, I got 9 invites for categorical neurology programs, and I got 2 invites for preliminary internal medicine programs, and then I got 1 invite for a transitional year program. So in total, I got 12 invites out of almost 100 programs that I applied to, including categorical neurology programs and prelim programs.
Freddy, how much money you spent?
Just applying, I think it was a little bit over $2,000. And traveling, including Airbnbs and plane tickets, some of these plane tickets were bought at the very last minute. It was in total about $5,000 in expenses related to the whole interview season.
Freddy, don't take this personal, but many of the questions that these chats that we have from Colombia, and I try to kind of join those chats, are medical students that are hoping to become a doctor in the United States. These numbers might frighten them. I asked you at the very beginning, did you come from a wealthy family? Obviously, your sister is a dentist. They do very well in the United States. Did she help you with cash money in dollars, or do you pay your way through this working part-time or on the side? I mean, can you advise us just to see how you manage the financial aspect of this that is so frightening for many of us?
Yes. So a big part of what made it all possible is I've always had a very good credit. I've had credit cards since I was a child. My dad always encouraged us to have kind of like joint credit accounts.
Yeah. For our listeners that have never been in America, that's a big deal. Creating credit in America. And obviously you need a social security number to do credit. So that's exceptional as well. So, creating credit takes a long time. Well, it's 5 to 10 years to have a good credit score. So you're saying you had a credit score that was off the hook. That's awesome. Go ahead.
Yes. So a good amount of available credit and a good, credit score. I have some credit products that I've had since I was a child. So that was definitely very helpful in terms of just making everything happen. My father really provided most of it, and earning in Colombian pesos, it's difficult because it ate through a big portion of his savings for to pay off credit cards. But also, I had a loan from my father, and I have a cousin who works in currency exchange. So I invested pretty heavily in my cousin's business. So it's actually been very profitable. And at the current moment, pretty much independent in terms of taking care of all of my expenses except for living expenses because I live with my sister. So that's been possible because of, this currency exchange business my cousin manages in Colombia.
What would you advise the regular Colombian, the regular international medical graduate that comes from India, Africa, Australia, on how to get ready financially for this?
Definitely, I'd say that it's ideal to have a job as a physician in your country before moving into the United States. I think maybe a year, if you handle your finances well enough and if you focus as much as you can on saving, I think you already have a big head start. Okay.
So 13 interviews, thousands of dollars in credit card. What was next? So you go through interview number 1. Did you smash them in a few weeks or you spread them out? What was the interviewing season for you like?
So my interview season started the last week of October was the first interview I had. I think that was a really good experience because that was the transitional year program that invited me. So that was the first one. I think it was October 21st. But most of my interviews happened between November 5th and November 25th. So they were all crammed up, most of them. And then I had 2 interviews in December and 1 interview in January. So pretty much since I was available most of the time, then I was, I canceled some interviews because some of them, there was a conflict between dates, the dates that were available. Usually programs, they give you a set of options, and if you can't, make it to any of those options, then they put you on a wait list. So I was waitlisted for more programs. But in terms of just going to interviews, it's definitely an advantage to have the time to travel to all these places. During that time, I was working as a medical assistant here in Orlando that helped financially a bit. But then it was also hard to find that, I had to make up for some of the time because since I was traveling, then I couldn't, go to work. So I had to let them know ahead of time. So it all just got in the way. And it was an interesting experience, the whole interview season. But the structure of it was, I wish I could have had a bit more freedom to choose. A lot of these programs really invited me last minute. I'm sure I wasn't their first option, and I'm sure a lot of people canceled. And so I think if they invite you early on, you have a better chance to structure your interviews in a way that's more convenient for you.
So out of 13, how many you canceled and how many you traveled to?
So I ranked 10 programs. I'll look at it from the ranks. I pretty much canceled all of the prelim interviews because most of them just got in the way with the categorical neurology programs. Like, for example, I remember there was this one, there's a USF internal medicine program.
Yeah, right here in Tampa, Florida with me.
No, but it was one in Oak Hill Hospital, a bit north from the Tampa Bay area. And the only day I had available was the same day that I interviewed at the program where I matched at. So there was a lot of situations where I was waitlisted in this program and I was waitlisted in that program. I was trying to find, I was constantly getting into ERAS and looking at the calendar and seeing if anything opened up. And I always had to, to me, it was more important to go to a categorical neurology interview, obviously. So that's ultimately what happened. I ranked just 10 programs, 9 of which were neurology programs. And the other reason I canceled the prelim invites was because I didn't get any invitations to any advanced programs. So it didn't make sense to spend a lot of effort going to, prelim interviews when I already had a good amount of category. It was really, it was a gamble in a way, but.
You just said something huge for our listeners that don't understand what is a prelim versus a categorical and then having an advanced position. Can you explain that briefly coming from someone that went through this hassle?
Yes. So there's different types of programs. There's categorical programs, which put you through an entire residency training program from start to finish. So in my case, the way a categorical neurology program is structured is from postgraduate year 1, PGY 1 to PGY 4. So you pretty much start as an intern and you end the program and you're a neurologist. That's pretty much as simple as it gets. Then there's also preliminary programs, and these programs are mostly structured around internal medicine. In general, neurology programs have PGY 1 is mostly internal medicine. So preliminary programs are pretty much just that. They're the first year of internal medicine and nothing else. And then there's advanced programs that they offer you years 2, 3, and 4 of neurology training. So in my case, I didn't get invited to any advanced programs. So it just didn't make sense to spend a lot of effort going to preliminary programs because I was going to rank them last. They were going to be my backup option. And ultimately, I just ranked a transitional program. Transitional is a little different. So it's kind of like a type of preliminary program, but it's a bit more broad in terms of training. So you also do a couple of surgery rotations and OBGYN rotations. I just ranked it because I like it and because of location. It's also in Florida. So that's the reason why I put that program in there. And I had a good gut feeling from that program, even though for somebody who gets into neurology, a transitional year program isn't, it doesn't open the same opportunities as a prelim does.
Dr. Escobar, who taught you about all these things that I had to learn on my own? Do you listen to somebody advise you, or you just kind of learn on the go?
So I learned that from other people who had matched, people I reached out to. I think the most helpful people that I had the chance to talk to were the people on a Facebook group of Médicos Colombianos in USA. I think that's probably the best resource in terms of finding somebody you can actually trust, because, it's somebody who has some sort of affinity to you because we share that same nationality. We're both Colombian. So there's there's a sense of community. And a lot of the good advice I got from people on that group.
Wow, that's fantastic. So, Freddy, this is fantastic. You scheduled this all the way until late November, maybe one in January. Things are getting cold in the United States.
Yeah.
You come to the rank order list. What's up with that? It's so confusing. No matter how many videos, how many tutorials. Tell us more. How do you match these days?
The actual match is a very complicated algorithm. It actually won the Nobel Prize for Math and Economics in 2012 or 2011 or something like that. So it's a very sophisticated system. It's designed so that the applicants have more power to decide over where they're going to be working than the actual programs. And programs can decide if they participate in the match or if they withdraw from the match and they choose, they just cherry pick from their applicants. So there's different approaches. That means that what I just mentioned is what they call as all in or all out. So if you run a GME program and you want to choose which one of your applicants are going to work with you, then you offer them pre-match positions and you just withdraw from the match and then you just choose your own people. Most programs prefer to let it all, rest in the hands of applicants. So you go through the match and you rank the programs as an applicant, and the programs also rank their applicants on a list. Nobody knows how you rank them. There's obviously some sort of communication that goes on between applicants and programs, but it's discouraged. The NRMP, which is the National
Residency Matching Program,
they discourage you from getting in touch with your programs afterwards. And they also say that applicants should rank based on their personal preference and nothing more, and to not match based on your perceived probabilities of where you're going to match or where you think you're most likely to match.
Okay.
In my case, I did get some communication from programs. Ranking was a really tough decision because I liked all of the programs where I interviewed at. I really liked all of them. And I want to say my top 3 programs were kind of equal in terms of the program. So the tiebreaker for me was really location and convenience and family. I think that was kind of the tiebreaker for me because I just personally believe that kind of goes hand in hand with having a better quality of life, just being close to my family. So it was really hard to decide what programs to match for, to rank first. And especially because at the program where I actually matched, they did not communicate with me at all after the interview. And a lot of people say, hey, that doesn't mean anything. A lot of people say, oh, I matched at a program and I wrote them a love letter and they didn't write me back, but I still ranked them first and I matched there. So a lot of people have that experience. I think that was my own experience as well. But yeah, it's really all based on personal preference, and the algorithm does what it does, and it tries for everything.
What about residency program director? Do they wink at you or tell you, hey, you're going to be cool with us? I kind of sure your rank as high on the list. Do you think you should listen to those kind of, hey, teasing you to match and come to my program? I really like you. Or tell me about that. Like, how do you get around that stuff?
At least personally, the post-interview communication I had with programs, I felt it was very sincere. On my behalf, I actually changed what my favorite program was a couple of times. So before actually applying, my UCF program was my favorite program. And then somewhere throughout the season, before I was invited, I just got more convinced about other programs, and I was having a tough time deciding which one I was interested into more. And then I was invited to an interview by my favorite program. So then, that was the moment when I said, oh, I have a chance at, staying in Orlando. So I was really happy about that. And, then when I actually went to the interview, I kind of had a good feeling about it. And ultimately I went with my gut and I ranked them first, even though they didn't get in touch with me, because it's hard. I felt that I had a good chance at other programs. I felt that the program where I matched at wasn't necessarily that interested in me for some reason. You always have these thoughts when you're going through the whole match process.
You were obviously looking for geographical location. What were you looking for a residency program in the United States? I'm going to tell you the truth. I think they're all fantastic. They're all excellent. There might be some stronger, some weaker. Some are community-based, some are university-based. What were you looking for on those programs from the academic point of view, other than the location? Let's take the location aside from this decision.
So for me, again, I don't know if it would be good to advise this to anybody, but in my case, it was all how I felt about the program. It was really subjective. It was a gut feeling I had about the program. I went to different tiers of programs. I interviewed at some programs which were very well established, and I also interviewed at some programs that were very new. And a good lesson that the whole match process and the whole interview season left me is that really it just comes down to you. One program isn't better than any other program. A program is only as good as the people who are part of it. And wherever you feel that you're more comfortable and wherever you feel that you're going to be happy, I think that's the best choice for you. So at least in my case, I really liked 3 programs that are new, that don't even have their first class. And I just felt that I liked those programs very much, and I ranked them a lot higher than other programs. So at least in my case, prestige and name weren't that much of a factor. And most of it really boiled down to how, just going with my gut, basically.
That's great advice. That's fantastic advice. So you obviously recertified the rank order list multiple times because you changed your decision, especially the first program, right?
Yes, I'm sure everybody changes. I changed it at least probably 5 or 6 times. My first choice, I really only changed it once. So it was UCF at the beginning. I changed it. Then I changed it back. But what really changed the most was kind of like the first 5 programs. I just changed them in order. I knew that, this is my top 5, and I was really happy with those programs. And I said, well, to me, all these programs are kind of equal. So I feel, just as positive about all of these programs. But I don't know. It's just that some days I just woke up feeling that I wanted this program better than that one. So I kind of changed the orders around a little bit.
Hoping that dating life is not like that for you, huh?
The funny thing is a lot of the reasons why I changed the orders of certain ranks was because of program directors reaching out to me. Again, I'm sure I can't mention it by name because it's probably a violation or something, but I got good feedback from a lot of these program directors, and they reached out to me. And to me,
so that still happens. They say, "Hey, I like you, Dr. Escobar. Come. I can assure you, I'll offer you a spot with me. Come over."
Exactly. So
it still happens.
Yeah. So I had a couple of programs, and let's say they have 4 spots. So they'd call me and say, "You're in my top 4. If you rank me number 1, you're surely going to match at my program." So to me, the weird thing about that was that I would think, then what happens if I rank that program differently? What happens if I rank it number 3 or number 4? Would that mean I won't match? So to me, there was a lot of anxiety behind that because I submitted my rank list and then I would just think about, oh man, why didn't I rank that program first?
My God, you even regretted your final submission, huh?
So I wouldn't say I regretted it, but I had a lot of thoughts. I had a lot of thoughts about, well, there's this uncertainty that I'm gambling for because I was gambling for it. I put my number 1, even though I didn't have any communication with them at all. And I just, I risked it in the sense that I could have had certainty about matching a lot earlier than actually waiting for the whole match day.
How much of this is a gamble? How much of this is luck? How much of this is a connection with the program? And how much is this God just kind of helping you out?
I honestly wouldn't know.
I think it's a combination, right?
A combination of a lot of things, definitely. Some people say that, they even have negative experiences at programs and they still rank them first and they match there. And a lot of people say that they get really positive post-interview communication. Some people get phone calls even and they don't match at that program. So I think a lot of it is based on how random it is. And since it's an algorithm and it depends on how other people rank, what mostly decides where you match at is your competition. So how everybody else is ranking, how everybody else submits their rank order list. I think that's the main factor. And a lot of these residency spreadsheets, these Reddit spreadsheets, I think a lot of it contributes to you feeling, kind of more anxious or more secure, depending on, you're seeing other people and they're saying how many people are ranking this or that program first. So you kind of have a little bit more information about the other applicants, and ultimately it's everybody who decides where everybody matches. It's the applicants that have most of the decisive power in the end.
So tell my Colombian friends, my Indian friends, anybody across the world that wants to come here, hey, this is how you need to set up for the match. Kill your anxiety. What's the tip? What's your number one tip of advice?
Yeah, I think a very important tip is to stay away from forums and those Reddit spreadsheets. And I mean, it really provokes a lot of anxiety when you're checking those things every day. And you look at your program and you notice that somebody put an X next to ranking number 1 or ranking number 2. So you immediately think of it as, oh, I have, somebody else was competing for my spot. You're always thinking about these things. And, even before the match week is from Monday to Friday, I wasn't feeling very confident that I would match, even though I had, all these, I had all this good feedback from a lot of program directors and such. And I felt that my interviews were fairly successful. I felt comfortable in all of these programs. And I wasn't feeling very confident about matching, but ultimately I did. The first thing, when I got the email, I just sighed in relief because it was...
So that's the first day of match week when you tell Dr. Freddy, you have match.
Exactly. So after that, I just felt that, this big weight, was lifted. And I just, I was much more comfortable, for the following days because I knew that I was going to match into a program where I was going to be happy because I liked every program on my rank list. So that's another good word of advice is don't rank programs you don't like because, if in my case, I was anxious, just thinking about, if I was going to match or not, what if you're also, you have another concern, which is what if I match in a program I don't like? So, try to avoid that because that's kind of something else that gets in your mind.
I'm going to tell you the truth. One of the happiest day of my life this far, obviously, other than playing sports and winning a tennis match or a championship, I think it was the day that I passed step 1. That's one of the happiest days of my life. And 2, I didn't go through a match process like you because at the very end, I was asked to drop off the match. But I bet that's probably the second happiest day of my life and then getting married to my wife. How would you rank in order those moments of excitement and happiness in your professional career? What was the happiest day of your life?
I think the happiest day was when I found out that I was invited to interview at my favorite program. I think to me, the impact that had was, for some reason, I just felt a lot happier just knowing that I had a chance. And also when I found out I matched there, I think probably that and just graduating. To me, my graduation date was very special. My dad, even though my dad is not a physician, my dad is he's pretty well regarded at my university. He's an engineer and he's one of the leading researchers at my university. So he talked to the president of my university and he actually gave me my diploma. So I think that was a very special and a very emotive moment for me. I don't know what order I'd put them in. I'd probably say graduation first, then the day I was invited to my interview, and then the match day. I think those are probably the 3 happiest moments I can think of in terms of my career.
Wow. So match week comes to an end. Friday comes around. The program that you match is released at Friday, right?
Yes, Friday.
So you open an envelope or just open your In my case, was envelopes. Then you open your website and boom, Osceola Regional.
Yep, exactly. So, that was just a huge relief. I was very, very happy. I was just thrilled to finally know where I'm going to be spending the following 4 years.
So what do you do after that? You went out, had a drink, celebrated, you called the program, you called your dad, you went to Colombia, you stay here. What happened? How you celebrated that?
So that was very recently, and we were already quarantined and everything. So I told my sister, and I told my parents, I told my closest friends. And I did have, a couple of, I had a couple of glasses of scotch, and I just sat here at home and didn't do much. And then I just immediately, when I got the email from the program coordinator, I started the whole onboarding paperwork right away.
There is so much stuff to do. That's a whole nother process. Applying, well, you don't have to worry about applying for a social security, but applying for a social, filling the attorney's letters, getting in contact and sizing for your scrubs, your lab coats. How do you want your name to appear? Your badge, fingerprinting, picture taken. It is exciting. I think from now until June 30th is the fun part. And then when July 1st comes, you're like, holy crap, here I am,
I'm so excited. I already did most of the onboarding paperwork, even, all these online courses, all the HIPAA stuff and OSHA stuff. I was actually excited going through that. It's funny, I think I've probably done a lot of those courses, but just knowing that, this is my job, this is what I'm going to be doing. So it's very exciting. I already went to get my fingerprints and everything, and I try to do everything as soon as I got it, just out of the excitement of.
How do you see life happening and moving along the next 4 years?
I feel very positive about how things are going right now. A huge advantage is I don't have any debt right now. I paid off all of my debt, really. And I have some savings, and my dad has some savings, and we're thinking of getting another property here in Orlando. So I'm feeling very optimistic in the sense of just having a lot of freedom, really, a lot of financial freedom. And I think this is probably the first time where I felt that I don't have anything to worry about. I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of things to worry about when I start working, but at this very moment, I'm just very relieved, and all I have to think about is walking my dog and just sitting around watching TV, hanging out with my sister, and that's pretty much it. I've never been so relaxed.
This is awesome, Freddy. I guess you have explained this in such a nice and funny and a special way that many people are going to be liking this episode, because I think we needed something like this to celebrate Match Week, and I wanted to do that by celebrating you. And we're going to have a prominent neurologist here in the United States, and I don't know if you're going to end up doing a fellowship or not. I would advise you to do stroke or neurointerventions like my friend Dr. Vela Duarte. But, who knows? Who knows what's going to come down your path? You might like seizures. You might like movement disorders. You name it.
There's so much to choose from. I just like everything. I'm not particularly fixed towards one specialty yet. I think I like the outpatient type of lifestyle a bit more. I'm interested in neuromuscular medicine a lot, but I think I'll figure it out as I progress through residency. It's too early to say anything because there's just so much. There's so much. It's really hard to know what you're gonna do from such an early part of my training.
So let's get sentimental. Who do you want to thank and use this media to thank?
My family, my dad and my mom and my little sister and my older sister.
The 5 of you, huh?
Yes.
Awesome, bro. Well, anything else you want to tell our international medical graduates that will be going through this painful, exciting moments coming within the next few months as they get ready to get their application in line? Any final advice?
In terms of final advice, I think it's very important that whenever you're applying and you want to get ready for interviews, everybody says be yourself, and it sounds like it's not much, but it really is good advice. You have to live here in the States and you have to talk to people here. You have to understand expressions, and you have to understand the way people talk here, their sense of humor, their interest for small talk. If people don't walk up to you on the street and say, hey, I like your t-shirt or something like that, then that means you probably don't have a very pleasant demeanor. People here are extremely friendly and everybody wants to talk to you. At least, I don't know, I think that probably happens, on a daily basis. So I think that's good feedback in terms of if you're likable by, standards here in the U.S. I think it's very important to not only focus on scores and having a good application, but also just being a well-balanced applicant and, just adapting to life here in the States and just having fun while you're also doing it. Because a lot of this process is very subjective. A lot of it is just people liking you, and that is a huge advantage. If you're an agreeable person and if people like to be around you, I think you already have a much better shot than somebody who has 260 and can barely hold a conversation.
I think your dog is calling you out to take him outside to go potty. But one last thing, one shout out to Dr. Shay Data. She's a colleague and friend of mine, and Dr. Varun Agrawal, two of my most recent guests. They dedicate themselves to do this, and Dr. Data actually works a lot on the psychology of interaction with United States citizens and talks very much about what you have just said, how to make yourself a more attractive applicant by being a very empathetic person and doing the small talk and the little things that could give you an edge.
Yes, that definitely pushes your application a little bit. I heard that episode you had with her, and actually she was a resident when I was in JFK. When I went to JFK, I was only there for a month. I think she was probably in her second year or third year. I just remember her as a very strong person. I have that image of her as a very straightforward person, and she seems like she knows what she's talking about.
I agree on that, and I don't think you can find a better advisor than Dr. Data. So, well, Dr. Freddy Escobar, it's been an hour and a half of your time. We're going to be posting this show soon, and I hope that we got the message out there to our listeners. Remember, Dr. Freddy Escobar has said, don't rush it. Find a mentor. And don't multitask. Don't try to do too many things at once. Take your time and collect your finances, collect your family, find a group that you can probably exchange ideas with, a reliable group. And if people put bumps on the road and they don't want to let you get out of your country, you know what? Just follow your dreams. Even if it takes years, just get it done. Dr. Escobar, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and all my superstars across the world that are listening to this show, please remember, share, subscribe, leave me a review, because sharing is caring, and we're here for you. Thank you, Dr. Escobar.
Thank you very much. Just to add to that, also have some fun while you're at it.
Have fun, guys. Have fun. Freddy has said it. Have fun. So on the end of the no-shows, I'm going to have Dr. Escobar's contact information in case you guys want to reach out to him, probably for some tips of advice. You can funnel those questions through me, and feel free to keep giving me feedback, and I'll keep asking crazy questions.
All right, then do I give him my email or something?
Go ahead. What would that be? The meeting, the email to contact you?
Okay, so anybody can reach out to me if you need any advice, or if I can help you in any way. If you're interested in neurology, if there's anything that you want from me, I'm more than willing to reach out to you as well. You can write me an email at Freddy, so it's FREDDY E3M @gmail.com. That email, and I have my phone with me at all times, so I'm probably going to answer pretty quickly.
Remember, he said that has plenty of time in between now and June 30th. After July 1st, don't bother him. So Freddy, FREDDY E3M @gmail.com. Dr. Freddy Escobar, thank you very much. Have a blessed day, and I hope we get a lot of good download.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Have a good one.
Thank you, buddy.